and hosts are selling fast. So if you're feeling the squeeze, you're not alone. I know you've probably felt it, right? The bookings are down, the expenses are up, and profits are quickly shrinking. Maybe your place used to be booked solid like mine was, but now you're staring at empty dates on the calendar and it's extremely frustrating. Or worse, you're barely breaking even or losing money. So thanks to higher mortgage rates, rising cost, and cutthroat competition, right? You're not alone. You're absolutely not alone. Thousands of Airbnb hosts are rushing to sell right now. And in this live stream, I'm going to break down why so many are starting to cash out, what's driving this massive sell off, and whether you should get out now before it gets too worse. And make sure that you stick around because towards the end, I'm going to share the number one mistake that struggling Airbnb hosts are making right now when it comes to selling and why it could cost you thousands if you wait too long to get rid of your property. So, without any further ado, let's get into why so many hosts are actually giving up in the Airbnb world. Now, I know what you might be thinking to yourself, Shawn, this was supposed to be an amazing investment for us. This was supposed to be my way of figuring out how to build wealth through real estate. I have been told that this was easy. It's passive. It's something that I can do on my own, right? And this has been the biggest point of contention for me is the bill of health that people have been sold when it comes to Airbnb. And this is why so many people are starting to get out of it. And I will say this, I will say that the majority of people who are considering selling their properties right now have purchased during a certain period of time. And you know that time. It was during COVID up until like 2024, right? Even maybe even after 2024. Yeah, absolutely after 2024 and midway through 24 and even now, right? So that is going to be the largest portion of people who decide to sell their Airbnb because the market is currently correcting. And I'm talking nationwide. Now, I will say this for every single location throughout the US that allows Airbnb, it is different, but for the most part, it is pretty much the same with a little bit of change and a little bit of differences and a little bit of nuance. But when you look at Airbnbs that are in certain locations, especially destination locations, okay? Do you know what a destination location is? It's parts of the US that people go to vacation. The Pocono Mountains for me, the Jersey Shore for me, the Delaware Shores for me, the Maryland Shores for me, right? People go to these places, the Adirondacks in New York, the ski mountains in Vermont, the ski mountains in Colorado, the ski mountains in Montana, the beaches in Florida, right? Destination locations are generally places where there aren't a lot of people who live there full time, and it is a vacation destination. Okay. Those areas are going to be the ones that are hit the most, in my opinion. Next up are the areas that are in major cities where the crackdowns happen, right? And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. And then, they're like the two main locations, okay, that people are going to be selling off their Airbnbs and moving forward. So, how really did we get here? And why are Airbnb hosts deciding to sell? So, if you are watching this or you do watch this and you currently own a property and you're feeling the stress, you're feeling all of the angst that comes with owning a property right now in whatever area you're in, make sure that you drop it in the chat or drop it into, I'm going to pull up the live stream. Drop everything below. Ask the questions. Let's figure out how to get through this, right? Let's figure out how to work through this and really nail down whether you should be selling. So here's the first point, the first section that I want to talk about today. Why Airbnb hosts are selling. That's a good one, right? The number one reason is oversupply is crushing profits, market saturation, right? Oversupply is crushing profits and market saturation. You have heard this before. I know you've heard this before, especially if you listen to anything that I do about Airbnb, right? The short term rental market has become saturated. I will say this, I don't believe it is oversaturated, but I do believe that it is saturated to a point where you can almost not fully understand what is going on in terms of the saturation. Meaning, if you are in a market where there's just an oversupply, in your mind, it's like, okay, this oversupply means it's fully saturated. There's no more opportunity there. That is not true. There's always going to be opportunity. Always, 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 no matter any kind of real estate market. The short-term rental market has become, and I actually want to take a step back, and I don't even want to use that word oversaturated. I told myself I'm not using that word. It is extremely competitive. Okay, so saturation, and if something is saturated or oversaturated, it means that there's no more room left. Again, but there always is room left. So it is very, very, very competitive. So the oversupply is crushing profits, and the market is just way too competitive in many of these areas, especially, like I already mentioned, these tourist destinations, the Pocono Mountains, Vail, um, all the shorelines, right? On the East Coast, from the Jersey Shore down to the Outer Banks, down to Myrtle Beach, down to Florida, right? All these destination locations, all these popular tourist destinations. This increased competition has led to a significant decline in occupancy rate. Back before all of the explosion happened with short-term rentals, right? Because the short-term rental market has actually been around for a very long time. It's been around for decades throughout the US in these tourist destinations, but it wasn't a very popular investing strategy like it is right now. Okay. It hasn't been that way. Post COVID, actually during COVID and then post COVID is when everything exploded. So there are varying numbers and there's varying data showing actually how many vacation properties there are, how many Airbnb properties there are, Verbo properties, short-term rentals, whatever you want to call them, vacation rentals. I don't know. You use whatever word you want to use to describe it. There has been so much misinformation, I'll say, or disinformation, or just ignorance. There's these companies like AirDNA with everything they say you really have to take with a grain of salt, because they're just pushing people buying short-term rentals. So I'm always very cautious with what I hear, but I heard an estimate that there's about a million nationwide, a million different vacation rentals. Okay, so that number was significantly less in the beginning of 2020 and then way before, right? So this is why occupancy rates have declined. It is because the oversupply. Too many people purchased vacation rentals in a short period of time, and that saturated the market. In the Poconos for me, I bought in 2021. In September of 2021, we were live in October of 2021. It wasn't as bad as it is right now in terms of competition, but it was getting there, right? So if this was the market pre COVID, it got all the way up to here when we bought, and now it's right. So now the competition is extremely high. The occupancy rates will decline because of that. It's just natural. Declining occupancy rates nationally, right? Airbnb occupancy rates have decreased to around 54% as of April of 2024. And this is a notable drop from the previous year. I bring everything back to the Poconos just because that's the market I know the best and the market that I'm getting out of, right? So do not contact me if you want to buy in the Poconos, because I'm not helping people buy in the Poconos. I'm helping sellers sell in the Poconos because I know there are a lot of people that are going to be getting out of the business and they need a great agent to work with in order to help them sell. So I do not help people buy in the Poconos anymore. I only help people sell in the Poconos. The competition there is so high, it's so fierce that the occupancy rate is dropping. And that doesn't necessarily mean that people are not vacationing in the Poconos. People are vacationing there. People are vacationing in Florida. People are vacationing to Sedona, Arizona, and, you know, California, right? People are vacationing to all these areas. They still are. But the issue is there's too much supply. Unlike the housing market, unlike the residential housing market, which I work in every day, and there's an extreme shortage of residential homes for sale. Unlike that, when it comes to the Airbnb market, the supply is too high. The supply is too great. There are too many homes that are vacation rentals on the Airbnb platform, on Verbo, on their own private platforms right now. And this is causing occupancy rates to decline. But again, that doesn't mean that people aren't vacationing there. They are. They just have so many more options. Okay. They have significantly more options than they have ever had in history. Okay. Think about that. Right now, in 2025, in February 2025, there are thousands of more homes available to rent in the Poconos, just in the Poconos, than any other time in history. And that is the same for every single location in the US that hasn't dramatically, stopped Airbnbs altogether, like places like New York and Chicago and Houston, right? So there are more places to vacation than there have ever been before. So what that means is when there is more options, when the supply is very high and the demand is still there, people choose where they want to go. So let's just say, for instance, I'm pretty sure that where I own my home in Talamanting Trails in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, in the Poconos, I think the last thing I heard was that there's 265 listings or 275 listings, whereas prior to COVID, there may have been less than 100, right? Maybe. Um, Now there's potentially even 300. And I heard this number last year, and there's people that are still buying there, right? So last year, there was a significant amount of rentals available. So, if me and my family were going up there to vacation and we were thinking, okay, what do we need? 3, 4 beds. We want a hot tub. We want to make sure that there's a game room for the kids. If we were vacationing with other families, right? So we have all these options, right? And it all depends on what you're looking for. But the competition is so high because there's so many properties. There's so many properties available. So if you have 200, let's just say 300 homes in one development, in one small area, if you have 300 options available, that means that somehow you got to get all the way up to the top, that top 1 to 5% to really do well. To do well, like maybe you could cover cost if you're in the top 25%, right? Maybe you're not in that top 1 to 5 or even in the 1 to 10%, but you're in that top 10 to 25%. Maybe you're covering costs, right? So the competition is very high. The saturation or the supply is very high. And that's why occupancy rates are down so low. And people purchased homes with higher mortgage rates, especially if you bought in 2022, halfway through 22 and on up until now with these higher interest rates. So your mortgage is way higher than it should be, right? But that's where you're at. And it's very, very difficult for people to cover expenses. Okay. So Now we're looking at the financial strain on hosts. So hosts who expanded their portfolios using aggressive financing are now facing challenges in covering mortgage payments, right? And operational costs due to the reduced bookings. So one very interesting thing that I heard, and this has to do with the specific loan, and I'm drawing a blank on the type of loan it is. It's I just call it the investor loan. I can't think of what the name of it is at this time, but it's the loan that people are getting. It's supposed to be shorter term, and the interest rate is really high. And the whole goal is to get into a property with no docs, no tax returns, right? So like a subprime loan, right? So those loans that like caused a 2008 crash, I'm not calling for a 2008 crash, but these loans that people are getting, not everyone, it's just, certain investors are getting these loans. I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on that. It's really driving me crazy. It's a no doc loan. I can't think of it. I can't believe. But anyway, the interest rates are so stinking high. And they're like, oh, well, I'll get into the property with the hopes that interest rates will fall and I'll get the home up and running. I'll get the net operating income up so then I can present it to a bank and refinance out into long-term financing. But there's no opportunity for that, because the rates aren't going down. They're just below 7%. There's no stinking opportunity, right? So these people have these really high interest loans. They're trying to cover their mortgage payment, and it's like, it's not working, right? They don't have that option to refi out into better financing, you know? So that's a big challenge. And then you have the operational cost. It's hard to cover your operational costs when your bookings are down. It's hard to cover those costs. What are you going to do? A lot of people have to come to the table. I had to a couple months, right? You have these higher costs and mortgage payments. They're pretty much eroding all margins of rising interest rates, and it's insane. Increased interest rates have made refinancing less favorable, and it's leading to these higher mortgage payments for property owners. Higher mortgage payments are if you're not buying cash and you're financing it, a lot of people are in trouble. And these are the people that are going to be selling with the higher interest rates and the higher monthly mortgage payments. And they purchase from 2020, maybe even the end of 2020. I mean, I got a 4.5% interest rate. That's pretty good. I mean, I had a lower interest rate. What I had to do just because I had, just for whatever reason, um, I had to actually buy the home with my brother, and then I had to refinance him out. So we bought it with him because it made our interest rate as partners. Um, so it made the interest rate really low. I think we were in like 3.5%. And then I had to refi out and get him off the mortgage. And then we went up to 4.5, which is still pretty good. I mean, we refied in 2022, so we were still able to get 4.5. But anyone that purchased in the 5, 6, 7%, 8% range, your mortgage payments are through the stinking roof. Though, and I'm telling you, these are the people that are going to be selling their homes in mass. And this is across everywhere. This is not just the Poconos. This is across the entire US. People got into this business of Airbnb, of short-term rentals, and they have these higher costs now, and then they cannot keep up with it. So they are the ones that are going to be selling, right? And then on top of that, you have maintenance expenses and the cleaning fees. They have gone higher, right? So this is further squeezing profit margins for a lot of hosts. Maintenance, this is nuts to me, and I just found this out from my cleaner. There is a shortage of salt in the Poconos. Okay, the winter season this winter has been brutal up there. It's been pretty rough here in terms of really cold weather, but they've been getting super super cold weather, a lot of snow, a lot of ice, right? Because the weather isn't warming up enough to melt it naturally, and there's a shortage of salt. So that means that the people who do have salt and they sell it in bulk, they're charging more for it. So that's just one aspect of it. People are charging more for freaking salt now. Salt. Who would have thought that was going to happen? But this is coming back to, this is eventually going to have to get back to the host. Hosts are going to be paying more. Your maintenance expenses are going to go up, right? The cost of everything, we know this, is super high right now. Super high, right? And in certain areas, this is like the real kick in the nuts. Increased taxes and insurance premiums. So many states have implemented higher taxes on short term rentals, and insurance premiums have also risen, adding to financial burdens for property owners. Just think about all the locations that have been experiencing extreme weather issues. All of these locations that have been experiencing extreme weather. The Asheville area, there's a ton of short term rentals there. The whole reason why I got into the short-term rental business is because I was visiting North Carolina. I was in Lake Lure, North Carolina, at a short-term rental, and I was like, "This is amazing. This is awesome." I had at that point we were investors, my wife and I. And, I've been in the real estate business for 9 years, so we were thinking of other ways to make income, and we thought, "Wow, why don't we buy a property down here?" We literally started our journey talking to a mortgage professional in Lake Lure, right? In the Asheville area. And if you know what happened to that area with the floods and the extreme weather that they had, our business would have been completely wiped out. So think about all the people that are going through that. And these insurance premiums have skyrocketed on them. Not only that, it's the lack of people actually coming there now. So we would have had to, I don't know what we would have done. I have no idea what we would have done if we actually owned a property there like we wanted to, like we wanted to buy a property there. So that's crazy. A lot of people are going through this now, and that's forcing them to have to sell, right? And could you imagine being in areas like that? Or being in an area that's close to LA, owning a short-term rental that was really affected by the wildfires out there. Maybe your house burned up, right? And you have to deal with the insurance of getting the money back, right? So there's so much that is happening. And that's like, those are the extreme cases, right? But just the higher expenses and the financial burden that hosts are taking on now is making it very difficult to even break even. So that is a reason that it's going to be causing a lot of people to sell their property. A lot of people. And then this is one of the bigger ones that I talk about a lot, and it's the short-term rental regulations are tightening across the nation. So very strict city regulations in a lot of areas, like New York, right? So places like New York, they've enacted very stringent laws, right? So they require hosts to register with the city and they limit rentals to primary residences only. And I'm pretty sure I heard, got to double check this, but like you actually have to live there to rent it out. Like who wants to do that? If I'm coming to New York and I'm staying in a short-term rental, I don't want to stay with the owner. I want to stay at your house. I don't want you there. Get out of here, man. There's so many places that just completely outright banned it. So many different cities, right? So people bought under the presumption that they were going to be able to make, this short-term rental income for an extended period of time. And now they're finding out that is not true. They're getting completely screwed. Sorry, I'm going to go back to the chat just to make sure everything's okay. All right. So here we are in these difficult positions, unfortunately, where selling. Hosts are selling in mass in a lot of these areas. And it's like, what are you going to do? How can you really get by? And just touching on the regulations, just going back to that before jumping ahead at all. Um, some of these cities, again, outright banned it. Bans on short-term rentals, right? In in a town next to me, because I live in the Philly suburbs, so I live in Downingtown, PA. The town next to me, Westchester, PA, it's a very popular area, extremely popular. At one point, people were using their properties as short-term rentals. It wasn't like there was hundreds of them. There were like dozens of them. I think maybe a little bit more than 20. And then all of a sudden they're like, nope, can't do it at all. Can't do it at all. People fought back, fought back, fought back. And then eventually they came up with a plan for it, right? And this is just a very small area compared to places like Houston or Austin or Chicago or New York, right? But there's so many places across the US that are considering just outright banning short-term rentals in these areas to combat the housing shortages and just over tourism, which is wild to me because like why don't you want people coming to visit you to increase your GDP, right? For your certain area. But I get the idea of combating housing shortages. I completely get that because I completely understand the plight that buyers are going through right now with everything being so unaffordable. Everything is so unaffordable, especially housing, right? And there's so many people that are priced out of the market. And in areas like even in the Poconos, like it's been a thing that people have been complaining about, like, oh, all these people rushed in from New York and from Jersey and from Philly to buy short-term rentals and they drove the market through the roof. And now people that live there, 'cause there's not a lot. I mean, there are people that live there long term. It's not like a very highly populated area for long-term residents, but it is, right? There's businesses up there. There's obviously school districts there. There's a lot, extreme amount of tourism, right? It's a tourist location, but there are people that live there full term or full time. And there are locals that have stayed there for years and decades, and they wanted to buy houses eventually. And they were used to buying them in 2020 for like 150 grand. And now those $150,000 homes are 300, 350, 400. No joke. Just in a matter of years, they went up that much, right? So these areas, these cities, they're trying to combat these housing shortages because they're saying that people came in and bought them as vacation rentals and hurt the housing inventory there. And that is true. I absolutely believe that's true in certain areas. I understand that. I completely get that. Another aspect of it is the increased compliance costs. So all these new regulations, they often come with additional fees, right? And all more requirements, making it more expensive and complex for hosts to operate legally, which is a big struggle. That's a pain in the ass. I mean, for me to operate my business, I got to pay the HOA, I got to pay the township. I wouldn't be surprised if the county starts making you pay soon. So all these reasons are leading to host selling, right? And now we're coming up to the second part of this, which is what does this actually mean for you as a host? We talked about it, right? So you have this increased competition. Not just, and this is what is happening in the Poconos specifically, and I know there's a lot of other areas throughout the US as well. You have the increased competition as a host, okay? So now for the people who want to sell, you have increased competition among sellers, and that's flooding the market. So as more hosts decide that they want to sell, the real estate market, particularly in areas with high concentrations of short-term rentals, is becoming saturated with listings. The Poconos is a buyer's market. I have my home for sale currently in the market, right? So let me see if I can actually pull this up for you. Da, 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 da. I'm gonna pull up the MLS just to show you. I like to show everything in real time. That's always my goal. I'm going to show you guys in real time. So there is a flood of properties. There's just a flood of properties, unfortunately. Fortunately for buyers, right? Because now, fortunately, unfortunately, right? Because even for the people that want to be there, they're still dealing with the fact that in places like East Stroudsburg, which are more popular areas, um, these the cost is just so dang high, right? So the people that are local that are first time buyers and they're not making enough to buy $400,000 house, unfortunately. So now they're in a position where it's like there's more opportunity, but it's not cheaper. It's not cheaper at all. And that's a challenge, right? So when I go to residential, okay. When I was first looking to buy a property in the Poconos, and I'm going to share my screen with you guys. When I was first looking, I had access to Flex MLS. Okay. This is Flex MLS. This is the MLS that's specifically for the Pocono area, but there's all kinds of different MLSs. This number right here, if you can see where I'm circling, when I first started looking, that number was like in the hundreds. It was like 600, maybe 700 at sometimes. So there wasn't that much. Now you can see there's 1100, right? So it has become more of a buyer's market in the area. And if I go to, let me see, I can go to my specific HOA just to show you the competition. There were times when I was looking and there were like 10 houses for sale, 15 houses. But I put it in now and there's 46, right? So now here we go. There's 46 properties. This is just one little HOA, one little subdivision of properties for sale. So people have options to pick, depending on price point from all these. Here I am, 132 Keats Lane. So the days on market in this area are very high, unfortunately, if you need to sell fast, but I'm not in a position where I need to sell super fast. But you can see our listing's great. We have a nice house on half an acre. We have an additional half acre lot to sell with it. We have it's coming fully furnished. We have a hot tub. We're gonna throw in the golf cart, right? So it offers a lot. Um, but the competition right now is very high, and that is one of the big issues. With the competition being so stinking high, it's like, you know, it makes it difficult as a seller. Like I'm a current seller talking to you because I'm in a position. That's why I'm making this video because, me and there's thousands of other people like me across the country that need to sell for whatever reason. So here you go. I mean, you can see like these are all the listings. This is a buyer's market. This is a buyer's market right now in more a neutral to a buyer's market. There's some areas, right? Because Talmenting Trails is this portion where I own does um sell quicker than a lot of areas. It absolutely sells quicker than a lot of areas. But there's some locations that the month's supply, or I don't know why I'm giving quotations. It's not like I'm stating anything weird, but the month's supply of inventory is like anywhere from 6 to 9. The month supply of inventory means the amount of properties that are for sale in a certain location. How long would it take to sell that current supply of inventory? In where I live, right now in life in Downingtown in the Philadelphia real estate market, the month supply of inventory is less than 2 months. So if you're 4 or less months, you're in a seller's market. 5, that's like a neutral. 6 and above is a buyer's market. During the crash, the 2008, 2009, 2010, the month supply of inventory was in the like 8s across the country, right? 8 or 9. Couldn't give away a house. With a seller's market, you're at like 4 months or less is a seller's market. Since I got into the business, it's always been around there. Now we're at less than 2 months. So it's a strong seller's market. Not just a seller's market, it's a very strong seller's market. And that means, like, for these areas, and this has a lot to do with this live stream today. If you're located in these destination areas, you have to look at what the inventory is like. You have to see how much inventory is actually available. Are you in a buyer's market, right? So if you're in these destination areas, and I don't know, like, tell me, like, let me know in the comments, what area you in? What kind of market is it? Do you know? How many homes are for sale that are like yours in a certain mile radius, 2-mile radius? So strong sellers market, the competition, not only to rent your house as an Airbnb owner, is extremely high, but also now to sell is very high. It's very high. So that means that whatever you are deciding to sell, you have to really take into account, did you miss the height? I missed the height of the market to sell 100%. I missed the height of the market to sell. I probably, more than likely, if I wanted to get that 425 price point that we're listed at, which I do believe there's someone that sees the value in owning the land next door, which, it's 25,000 piece of land, and then you can own the house right next to it that's already ready to go. But I missed the top of the market to sell. I wish I would have sold in 2023, right? In your area, did you miss the market? Did you miss the top of the market, right? So now are you in an area where all these people are selling, which means that you're going to have the potential decline in property values. So an oversupply of properties leads to decreased home prices. That's just how it works, meaning you're going to receive less for your property if you delay selling or if you've reached the top of the market. And that's what a lot of hosts are going to be facing. A lot of hosts that want to sell, that have been in positions where they want to sell, unfortunately, they are missing, those higher prices that they probably could have got a year ago. And this is why I always tell people that timing the market when it comes to selling, I mean, it's almost impossible. You have no real idea. The values keep going up where I live. I could sell my house now for 600 grand. In a year from now, I might be able to sell it for 625. In 5 years, right? It's like you just don't know. You can't really time the market. You can't time the real estate market. Um, Another important piece that I want to talk about is limited viable alternatives to short-term rental. So besides using your property as a short-term rental, you can also use it as a midterm rental. Like, that's the only other way for a lot of these people to make a profit. Because if you're in an area like mine in the Poconos, you can't just turn it into a long-term rental at the mortgage payment that I have now and and break even, because the long-term rental demand, and I'm sure it's like this for a lot of areas that are ski and snowboard areas, right? These winter locations, to turn them into long-term rentals, you're not going to make any money. You're going to lose money, right? So people, while they want to pivot to midterm rentals, which is 30 days or more, it can be an option. The market that like market segment may not be robust enough though in the area to offset the losses from the short-term rentals. Now, I'm fortunate where I live, because I thought about doing this because there are a lot of not a lot of, but there's a pretty decent amount of hospitals and healthcare in that area, and a big portion of midterm rental guests are traveling nurses. So that's something to consider if you live in an area with more, whether it's healthcare or just more job opportunities. Besides healthcare, there's not, there's not really much in the Poconos at all. And that really, and then I just want to touch again on the long-term leasing challenges to transition from a short-term rental to a long-term rental, unless you're in a popular city, it's going to be very difficult. Right. So, and I thought about that a lot for these places like Austin that crack down or Dallas that crack down. Depending on what your rate is, like you could probably just rent it and hopefully break even, maybe make a little bit of money. But if not, then you're going to be selling. And that really gets into the third section of this live stream today is like, what should you do if you're struggling? So if you are considering selling, if that makes sense for you, you got to assess the financials. So you have to really go through and conduct your thorough analysis of your income and expenses. Every single person that wants to see the property, that's seriously interested, they're going to ask you for financials. And this is one of the biggest annoying things that is happening for me. I can admit that I did not fully maximize my property. I did not manage it to its fullest potential. So that means that the income and expenses are not as good as where they could be, as where they should be. Every single person that wants to buy it, that is interested in it, that wants to look at it, they ask for a copy of the financials and they base it off of the current financials. And they don't understand that when it comes to short-term rental investing, the property is one piece, and then you as the manager is the other bigger piece. Bigger piece, because if you do it right, if you manage it correctly, if you have the social media presence, if you're really good with doing short form video content, right? If you're good with connecting with local businesses to form collaborations, to form partnerships, right? There's so much you can do as a host that even with an average property, but if it's really managed very well, there's so much you can do as a host to drive up the revenue, right? So it's not just about the property and the numbers, right? Because so many people look at the numbers, they're like, oh, well, I can't make that work. Yeah, because they don't understand. They're very ignorant to the fact that the house is a portion and then the management is the way bigger portion, in my opinion, right? There's so much that I could do, but I just don't have the capacity and the desire to do it. But you can come in and there's strategic updates you can make. There's and I'm speaking specifically for my property, that you have the house next or the lot next door that you can do something with, like if you have money to invest into it. And that's the challenge that a lot of people that are selling short-term rentals are going to be facing right now, is the fact that their numbers look bad and the buyers are going to be basing their purchase price off the numbers. That's the issue. And they don't realize it, because a lot of these people who still want to get into short-term rental investing, they're not short-term they don't know the business, right? And they're being led by agents who don't know it either. So it's kind of like the blind leading the blind. But if you have a seasoned short-term rental investor who knows, like, okay, this is under market value in terms of the numbers. This is, I can get just by doing what I do, creating an email list, right, of all the past guesses to constantly be marketing to them. Uh, Having a solid social media plan to constantly be marketing to people. Contacting your friends, your family, your coworkers on a consistent basis, putting your property in front of them, right? The marketing aspect of owning a short-term rental business is so undervalued, And just by doing that, but doing it consistently, can drive up your revenue, even if you don't have the number one property that's fully renovated and has everything going for it, right? Just by marketing it and making people aware of it can increase your revenue, right? And there's so many people that they're just ignorant. They just don't know any better, right? So if and this goes back to, if your property is no longer profitable, it's time to be prudent and it's time to sell, right? Before it's way too late, and hopefully hopefully you're not going to lose money. But if you bought in 2022 or if you bought in 23 and 24, I mean, you might be in a position where you're going to lose money, and that sucks, dude. And I feel bad. But that's just how the market is. You got to act quick. So delaying the decision to sell could result in lower property values, right? That's just simple supply and demand. If you delay it and more listings enter the market, if the supply is higher, buyers have more to choose from. And if the buyer pool is not as high as it was, then it's very, very challenging. It's going to be very, very challenging. So let me know in the comments, where are you at in all this? Where do you fall in this as a host? I'm very curious to know. Let me jump back to the chat, make sure. All right. You have to enhance the property appeal. That's one of the biggest things that you really need to do if you're thinking about selling, right? And everyone falls into a certain category of what you can do to make your home more appealing. So if you enhance in property appeal, that means investing in minor upgrades and ensuring your property is well maintained. That's going to attract buyers, and that's going to potentially secure you a better sale price. You have to put some work into it if it needs work in order to sell. So, if you're in that position where you're attempting to trying to maximize the sale, you're going to have to put a little bit more money into it. Okay. That's just how it is. That's just how it is. Okay. So when it comes to selling your property, it's the same principles that apply to selling your primary residence, right? You have to make sure that it's in great condition. You have to make sure that the marketing is high. You have to make sure that the property is up to the surrounding area, right? The value of the surrounding area. And you just have to do certain things where I'm not going to get into all the process. I've made so many stinking videos. I have so much content about how to get the most for your home when you're selling on my page. So if you want to learn more, if you want to learn more about that, then just let me know and I'll send you the right videos. But if you are attempting to retain the property and you want to keep the property, explore alternative rental strategies. So the midterm rentals is one of them. That could work for you depending on where you are. I don't know. Probably the best bet would be to hire a property manager. You have to find the right one. I mean, they're like a dime a dozen, but the really good ones are not. The really good ones who, I've had so many come to me. They're like, yeah, oh, your property should be making just as it is 75,000. I can get you there. They say they can get you there. They essentially make promises to get you there, but they have nothing to back it up. It's like, okay, if you can get me 70 grand, get me the 70 grand and then I'll pay you. No, I need to be paid now, right? Okay, well, you're making promises to be able to increase my revenue 15, 20, 25 grand. Put your money where you right. No, there's no property managers are going to do that. They're just going to tell you what you want to hear to try and sell themselves and make them seem better than they are. But that's an option, right? If you can find the right person who can do that, that's an option that helps you retain the property, right? Because ideally you don't want to sell, but you're probably in a position where you do if you're if you're watching this. Optimizing the pricing too, so make your rates more competitive, which I know, right? You're chasing the market down, right? Unfortunately. And even if lowering those nightly rates are, and then look into reducing the operational costs. So identify areas where you can cut expenses without compromising too much guest experience. Negotiate better rates with the cleaners if you can, but that's challenging, right? Because the cleaners aren't, they're not making a ton of money. They're not making hand over fist money. It's not a situation like that, right? So if you're in a position where you need to sell, right? You just need to sell. It's cut the cord now, right? And move on. Cut the cord and move on. That's what I suggest. If you do need to sell, if you are located in the Poconos and you're watching this and you want me to help you sell, I would love the opportunity. I want to help people get out of it too, right? If you want to buy, don't contact me if you want to buy. I don't care. I'm just messing around. I do care, but I'm not the right person to help you, right? because I'm helping people get out, not helping people get in. And if you're located anywhere in the US or even Canada, right? I have a network of agents now of 25,000 agents within my brokerage, nationwide and in Canada. So if you need help selling here, anywhere in the US or Canada, just let me know. And if you have any questions too, right? If you have any questions,